Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy with a CSS tutorial on widths and heights. Now, in this tutorial we're going to be taking a look at styling elements widths and heights, but in addition to this we're going to be looking at the minimum width, the minimum height, the maximum width and the maximum height properties as well. So we're going to be looking at some containers with some content inside and how minimum, maximum widths and heights affect things. But first of all, we're going to look at width and height just quite simply. So how do we go ahead and test this? Well, the first thing we've got is a empty document. We've got a link to our primary .css style sheet, and inside the body we've got nothing. And in our browser, I've just opened it up in Google Chrome, we have got nothing in the body, and we've got our element inspector open by right-clicking and inspect element. So we can keep an eye on things that we're looking at. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a simple container, which is extremely important to demonstrate this. So I'm going to say div id equals, and I'm going to give this an ID of container. Now inside of this container I'm just going to put contents for now. I'm not going to bother writing too much or anything like that, but let's go ahead and open up our browser and see what's happened. Okay, so you can see that we've got a container here with just the text content inside. Nothing special at all. Okay, so back to our page here. Let's go ahead and start to style this container up. So we need to go ahead and select the container. And we're going to go ahead and give this a width and a height. Now we're going to give it a width and a height first, and then we're going to go ahead and give it a background so we can actually see this. We're going to look at it in Element Inspector, but we're not actually going to be able to see it on page because the default color of the container will just be nothing. There'll be no background. It will be transparent. So let's go ahead and give this a width of 300, and let's go ahead and give it a height of 300. Okay, so we've just basically got a box. So in our browser we can see that the container now has a width of 300 and a height of 300, and when we go ahead and hover over this, let's just pull this down slightly, when we hover over it we can see that the blue area now is a 300 by 300 pixel square. So we've used PX to style this. Obviously with containers, things that are on the page that aren't fonts, it's recommended to use pixels, not anything else like EMs or whatever else you could use. So we've styled our container with a width and a height. Let's go ahead and give it a background color. So we'll say background, and let's give it a background color of, let's say 777. Yeah, so 777. Let's go ahead and refresh, and you can see that the color of the background's changed, and we can obviously see the height and the width of the box. So now that we've got the height and the width of the box, we know how to set widths and heights on elements. Let's go ahead and take a look at setting widths and heights on other types of elements. So let's go ahead and get rid of our container. In fact, no, we'll do everything within here. Let's go ahead and create a we'll go ahead and create a I'll tell you what, we'll make it interesting. I wasn't going to do this, but we'll create a link, okay? And we'll start to style this up. You'll notice that when we're doing it, we'll get a few problems. So I'm just going to say, click here, and I'm going to link it to nothing, but we're going to sort of style this up and we'll see how we can do this. So when I refresh, you see we've got a link with the default colors. Let's go ahead and start to style this. Now, if we go ahead and inspect this element, you'll notice that we've got a width here of 62 pixels by 19. Google Web Inspector is telling us that. However, let's go ahead and try and set our own height to it. So I'm going to say class equals, we'll call it block link. Okay, so inside of here, let's go ahead and style block link, and let's give it a height of, let's say height of say 90 pixels and a width of 150 pixels. Now let's go ahead and refresh and see what happens. Okay, let's inspect. Now what's happened? Well, the element has not changed width or height at all. despite us styling it, and despite you can see that the matched rule is here, so match CSS rules block link height and width 90, it appears that we have not been able to or we haven't had the result that we want. And the reason for this is the way that this element is currently being displayed. Now, the way it's being displayed by default is, not, as an element that has a width and height property. It doesn't work like that. However, if we say display block, this will allow us to display or create a specified width and height for it. So now when we refresh and we inspect, you can see that the blue area, we've got 150 pixels height by 90, what have we got here? 90 pixels height by 150 pixels width. Okay, so height 90, width 150. Okay, let's just go ahead and make that a bit smaller. And refresh. It's better. Okay, so we've got a height of 30 now, and a width of 150. Let's just go ahead and give this a background color. So we'll say background #999. So we'll make it slightly lighter. Refresh, and you can see that the background color here has changed. So now that we know, how to give a height and a width, we've also given a display of a block, so we can actually style this element, and that goes for things like spans as well. Span elements, if you want to go ahead and style span elements, which are sort of unnecessary, meaningless bits of data, or otherwise used for styling, you'd have to give a display for that as well. Okay, so anyway, let's get on to minimum width, minimum height, maximum width, and maximum height. Minimum height, maximum width, and maximum height. Yep. Let's go ahead and change our container. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the link. We don't need our link anymore, and I'm going to put some content in here. So we've got the contents inside of our container. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of the width and the height. I'm going to keep the background color, but we're now going to look at the minimum width and minimum height. Now, a div by default does display as a block. You can see here, display block. That's the default user agent style sheet, which basically means your browser's default style sheet. And that is rendered with a display of a block which fills the whole page, essentially. So it fills its container element, which at the moment is body, okay, which has a width of 1249, you can see there. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and give this a maximum width. Now, what does maximum width really mean? Well, let's go ahead and do it. So max width, we'll give it a max width of 200 pixels. I'll make it a bit bigger. Okay, so when I refresh, you can see it has given it a maximum width of 500, and therefore this element is now at 500 pixels. The maximum being, what it's limited to. Now, if I was to go ahead and make this small, sort of so it would cut off some of the text, so let's go ahead and say 100 pixels, you'll see that what happens is it wraps the text in. Now, if I go ahead and say, yeah, so that's it basically. So maximum width of 100, it's, said, well, I can't go any further than this, so I'll just pop all this, text and wrap this down. Okay, so that's maximum width. Let's go ahead and look at minimum width. Now, if I was to go ahead and say minimum width is 200 pixels, what that's done is it's going to override that, and you can see that it's made it bigger. Now, you wouldn't specify a maximum width of 100 and then a minimum width of 200, but what this might be useful for is, well, when we look now, you can see that that's stretched the entire span. We've got a minimum width of 200, so the minimum width it can be is 200. And therefore this has just spanned the entire page because it has to be greater than 200. Okay, so that's minimum width. Now let's look at minimum and maximum height. It works exactly the same way, so it doesn't really take a brain to work it out. And minimum height 100 pixels. That will just mean that we get a height here of a minimum height of 100 pixels. Let's just specify a width for this now. Okay, now you can see we've got minimum height 100. If we go ahead and sort of fill some contents in here, so let's paste, 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 paste. Just paste all this in. What's going to happen to our container? Well, our container is going to expand. The reason it's going to expand is because we've got a minimum height of 100, but we haven't specified a maximum height. When I refresh, you can see that it sort of pulls that down, you know, and makes the container bigger. The container, although we've set a height of it of 100 pixels, sorry, a minimum height of 100 pixels, it's now 220 pixels height. Okay, so what happens now if we set a maximum height of 150 pixels? Not 15, 150 pixels. Well, when we refresh, you can see that it's, you know, it's said, well, I can be anything from 100 pixels onwards. Then it reaches this. Well, it doesn't reach it, but it reads the property, and it says, well, actually, I've got a maximum height of 150. So, you know, this container cannot be bigger than or higher than 150, taller in height. So the text just sort of flows over it. Okay, so there are a few things we can do to sort of, you know, target this. We can use an overflow property. So I can say overflow auto. Now what this will do is it will do what the browser is default to do. Well, not default to do, but what it should do. And you can see that this gives it a scroll bar. Obviously, at the moment, that's sort of the default, you know, way of doing things. Otherwise, we'd say overflow scroll, refresh, and we get a scroll bar down and a scroll bar across. We could, if we just wanted an overflow on the, you know, vertically orientated, we could refresh and we could just get a vertical there. Otherwise, if we wanted all overflow to be hidden, we could use overflow hidden. Now that's probably, you know, you can sort of cut it off here. You know, there's nothing here. It's just sort of cut it off and put it behind it. Okay. Now that's probably got a bit beyond the scope of the tutorial, but I guess this ties in with the height and width of an element, and you can, you know, base different actions based on your overflowing properties. Anyway, this gives you width and height, the minimum height and the maximum height, gives you really good control over the contents within your different containers, what the maximum height can be, what the minimum height can be, the same with the width and just the general width and the height. And then we've also gone and look at the overflow. So that is height and width properties in CSS.